Good morning, everyone. I was muted. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to just take a few minutes to start to let folks in, and then we'll get started. Can everyone hear me? Okay. Great. Just for our attendees that are currently here, we have a very solid hour to go, and so we are not doing a Q&A, but if you have questions that you want us to follow up with, feel free to put those in the chat, as well as any other questions. And then if you want to put where you're from, what organization you're with, that'd be great as well. I think we'll just go ahead and get started. We have a very tight schedule. I would like to first, again, welcome everyone. Good morning. My name is Kendra Lewis. I'm a new face at the center. I'm the managing director of CME, and I want to first by saying Chet Hewitt, our CEO and president, sends his sincere apologies this morning. He has an emergency meeting that he has to attend and would not be with us. But I have done this before. I'm not brand new at these panelists and at hosting a panel, so I'm excited to get started. So today is going to be, this webinar is about us exploring inclusive economic development and learning a little bit more about Community Economic Mobilization Initiative, which is CME here at the center. We hope that today's conversation is the beginning of an ongoing discovery and collaboration. And again, my name is Kendra Lewis, and I am the managing director. Today, I'd like to welcome a partner here at the center, Richard Dana, who is going to give an overview of CME and talk a little bit more of the history. I'd like to welcome our panelists, Zahira Mann, the president and CEO of Slate, Z, and Dr. Manuel Pastor, Distinguished Professor and Director of USC's Equity Research Institute. Welcome everybody to our discussion.
Thank you, Kendra. I'm gonna jump in here and do a little background on the Community Economic Mobilization Initiative, CME, and why we're all here today. First, just a huge thank you to our panelists for being here, and to Kendra for jumping in to lead us off today, and welcome everybody who's participating and joining us. As we look at where we have come from over the last few years with the pandemic, our world has really shifted, as we all know, dramatically. We've most recently gone from really being focused on relief work to now recognition that we have to be thinking about long-term. We have to be pushing ourselves forward again, rather than responding. We have to be thinking about the opportunities moving ahead. CME was launched with this in mind, the intentionality that our communities, for them to be strong, for them to be healthy, for them to be a part of our long-standing, what needs to be vibrant future, we need to really move forward now and not be reacting to what's occurred in the past. What we do know is that historically, we do have a past that hasn't allowed us to move forward. This initiative is designed to put us in a position to take that step. The Community Economic Mobilization Initiative was born with a thought that we have to launch now because we have some really amazing things happening, such as the California's Community Economic Resilience Fund, known as SURF. You have ARPA dollars, the American Rescue Plan Act. You also have the new Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. But if we're all collectively in communities and in community nonprofits and community-based organizations not in a place to take that next step and control these funds, to control the work that needs to happen, to push forward, we're going to lose opportunities. Short term, we need to put ourselves in position to really drive this. That's where CME comes to play. About building capacity through knowledge, through infrastructure in our own organizations. It's about building power through mobilization. And most of all, it's about driving and influencing the economic development decisions that are made to communities as opposed to with communities or through communities. We've been fortunate to have wonderful backing partners for CME. Over the last year, we've been able to really build up a great group of philanthropy partners that have stepped forward to make CME an initiative that can launch effectively. Sierra Health Foundation, the James Irvine Foundation, the California Endowment, Blue Shield of California Foundation, Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, and soon to be the California Wellness Foundation have all come together to put us at just over $19 million in funding for this amazing initiative. And one of the things we will be doing is launching a request for proposals, an RFP, in the beginning part of December, to be able to offer opportunities for folks to participate in CME. One of the things that we are excited about and really looking forward to is how it is we take this next step, which is around inclusive economic development and why we're here today. Part of what we're looking at and considering is how it is collectively our communities can step forward through strength building, through community engagement, through a process of power building, and then most importantly, through economics. We all know we can't service our way out of poverty. We all know that poverty and economic development is an important factor in our health. And we know that economies have not always been fair. And inclusive economic development is one of the things that we need to shift towards. And we can only do it with all of you. So CME is really here today to launch this opportunity for all of us to build this in an inclusive economic development model with our partners. And I would be remiss if I didn't say our partners at the state of California and with PolicyLink and with other groups that have stepped forward to really be a part of this. Really welcome, proud to be here and excited that we are taking this massive step. Lastly, I'll say this is not a short-term initiative. This is a long-term process. When I look at our panelists here today, I think both of them would admit this has not been a short journey. This is a long journey. And the only way we succeed is if we do it together. Kendra, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you for that overview and for all of your work that you have done to get us here today. So we'll get started. I'll ask the first question to our panelists, and I will let either one of you answer the first question. So defining inclusive economic development is, so by way of introduction, please share how you describe inclusive economic development and why it's critical in building healthy communities. Professor, is that good?
I would let Sahara go, but she's still muted.
Yeah, you're muted.
And hopefully I'm not muted. Can you hear me, Kendra?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah, her mute keeps popping on for some reason. We'll let you start, and then we'll help.
I will go while the technology gets figured out, but you're about to hear some brilliance from my friend Zahara.
Yes.
Who's got an amazing career and is in an amazing position right now. So when I think about inclusive economic development, this is something I've actually been working on, dreaming about, trying to make happen for 30 or 40 years, which, yes, indicates exactly how old I am. And when I think about it, I think that it's really important to think about inclusive economic development as centering equity, fairness, inclusion in the economic development process. And that it's really critical, I think, to think about a kind of time dimension of that. That I think it's a little bit about dealing with the past, as Richard was saying, trying to look at the inequities that have been baked into our system through redlining, restrictive covenants, racial discrimination in labor markets, and broken immigration system, and all the rest. How do we take a look at the damage that's been done, and how do we consciously have a strategy to repair it and to make reparations about it? That's the past. The second time dimension of equity or inclusive economic development is about the present. And that, I think, has to do with creating mechanisms for full participation in the economic planning process. We like to think that we've got a free market, and in many ways, we do have markets. But if you think about it, governments and the public sector play a critical role in terms of their investments in education and research and technology. And increasingly, if you look at the CHIPS Act, which is about creating a thriving chip manufacturing industry in the United States, or if you look at the Inflation Reduction Act, which is really taking an industrial policy perspective with regard to promoting green industry in the United States, those are government actions to sort of set the table for the market. And in terms of the present, I think it's really important for us to think about full participation of communities of color, low-income communities, communities that have been excluded in the past in the economic development planning process. By the way, that's a lot of what Slate C exactly is. But the other dimension of inclusive economic development and equity is thinking about the future, because a lot of times we celebrate the idea that we're going to get some economic growth without thinking about how it is that that economic growth could result in gentrification and displacement, which pushes people away from neighborhoods that have long been neighborhoods that they at least tried to thrive in. And then once the investments are there for the neighborhoods to do well, it creates a situation where rents are going up, business rents are going up, and the people who have stuck it out through the past don't get a chance to be able to benefit from the future. So one thing I would like to leave the audience with, again, is this time dimension of past, present, and future. It's about dealing with the inequities of the past, recognizing them, putting them on the table, talking about reparations in a variety of different forms, thinking about the current moment and what kind of planning capacities need to be there to fully participate in the conversation. I know we'll talk more about that. And then future casting to think about what is going to happen and to understand that things are not unabashedly good. Again, Slate Z is a perfect example of this. Big light rail investments, which are great, but create lots of threats of displacement unless there's the kind of investments in job training, development, home ownership, asset building that are essential so that people can actually benefit from all of that. And I hope that this little mini filibuster has allowed Sahara to fix her mic.
I think it's fixed. Yes.
Yay.
Thank you. It's working now. Well, good morning, everyone. So great to be here. Thank you so much for including me and Slate Z in this conversation. And thank you so much, Dr. Pastor, for that overview. And then also for the mentions of Slate Z, because this is exactly the work that we were doing and what we were designed by the community to do. And really this effort in terms of like how we really think about inclusive economic development. I think ultimately what it comes down to, it's the pieces that Dr. Pastor beautifully laid out in terms of how we're looking back, the present, and how we're looking forward. And then ultimately it's how do we ensure that communities are able to thrive by providing them with opportunities to make their own decisions. And they're able to make their own decisions of what works best for their family when there's enough support around where they have number of options and they have choices. So at Slate Z, we do that by working on issues like education and jobs and small business and entrepreneurship, transit, which is really a lot about access, and then also the public infrastructure, and then community wellness that we do through public safety. It's how do families actually make the decisions that are best for them? Because a family will always make the best decision for the family as long as it has the resources at its disposal and the ability to do that. And so I think that's ultimately what it boils down to. The policies that are being developed now and the new bills and the new funding allow for that if we take advantage of this opportunity. We could easily, rather than using it in a way that allows for real transformational change, where we get to have different generational outcomes than we've had before, we could easily have this opportunity move by and have the same exact outcomes that we've seen for years for families. And what I think we're at, hopefully collectively, with so many of the organizations that have been doing this work for years, with the various academic partners, various governmental partners, is wanting to have a solid substantive change so that we're not repeating and having the same conversations generation after generation after generation of how do we address these issues. We've really tried to do something that is fundamentally different. And I think that's the opportunity that we have right now and how these various pieces of funding have been designed. In order for that to happen, we have to ensure the implementation actually follows the spirit of how they were laid out.
Thank you. That is, I think, the wording of the hour is taking advantage of this opportunity. And so one of the questions, are there any good examples or models in California of inclusive economies? Any you can point to, past, maybe some that have evolved?
Well, I'll say a couple of words about this. I think that the challenge is that we don't have good models at scale. We've got good models that are smaller. So we've got tools like community benefits agreements, which have been used to leverage economic development, particularly in real estate, to deliver benefits for communities. We've got the kind of job requirements that people have fought for around transportation projects to make sure that construction jobs and eventually permanent jobs go to workers that have been locked out, have been left behind and kept behind in labor markets, particularly Black and Latino workers. We've got projects, again, like Slate Z, which are trying to take advantage of a particular set of investments and create a set of programs where people can participate. I think that we've got what happened in Fresno during the Transformative Climate Communities program, a lot of hard work by community-based organizations, the local community foundation and others to create a more participatory budgeting process about how that funding from California's cap and trade dollars would be deployed within Fresno. We've got examples from Imperial County where community groups have recognized the gold rush or gold mine that's about to be launched by the presence of lithium in around the Salton Sea and fought hard for a lithium tax, which is going to be used to create opportunities for communities. I think that the challenge is that we don't have something that's already more at a sort of citywide or metropolitan region level, and that is really the next frontier. I think there's been a consciousness raised that we need to address this, and I think SURF offers a vehicle to do that. All of these other dollars coming in are going to be very important, and actually the SURF tables, the tables that have been set up by the Community Economic Resilience Fund are going to wind up being important tables that people go to around those other dollars. So I think we've got sort of mini examples to point to that are really inspiring, but I think we've got a challenge with scaling. And I think the problem or the problem and the opportunity for community-based organizations, equity-oriented groups, progressive forces is that business already knows how to scale to be able to influence region-wide development. And what we really need to do is work together to scale up a vision at our metropolitan level and then a vision at the California level about what equitable development will look like. That's why I'm so excited about the opportunity that CME offers.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would just, in terms of that add, like, absolutely, we have a lot of these smaller pieces that are occurring that are important. And it's a matter of how do we link them and start having a real comprehensive strategy. You know, the city of LA has been doing some wonderful things in terms of procurement contracts. The County of Los Angeles is working on some equitable contracting efforts. There's universal basic mobility that's occurring for Slate Z with our partners in South LA. We just received a transformative climate communities grant, which will be $60 million. Thank you. 35 million of that is new state funding. And then we're leveraging 24.6 million from our various partners. So that's going to be a great investment within South LA. And that's within a 3.9 square mile area. But what does that mean for the rest of the county? We can serve as an example, but we really want to see these types of investments throughout where communities are deciding what do they want to see in their areas? How do residents want to see their neighborhoods constructed and built? And what are the job opportunities associated with that, where they can really see themselves in those positions and they can see, you know, their children and their children's children in those positions in the future as living wage jobs that will sustain them.
Great, thank you.
And sure, might I be able to add one thing to that? And
go for it.
Sahira would comment on this too,
Mhm.
which is I think that another task with regard to scaling up and building models of inclusive economic development is getting the metrics or the measurements right so that we know what it is that we're fighting for and what it is that we want to hold the state of California and other partners accountable to in terms of achievement. And I would suggest that there are sort of three things to keep in mind as we build metrics of accountability, which I think are going to be an important part of this process and certainly have been part of the Slate Z process, which is why I'd be interested in what Sahira has to say about this. The first is that we actually need to focus not just on income, but on wealth. One of the things that's really important to realize if you understand that past dimension is that there's been asset stripping from the Black community, from the Latino community, from Indigenous peoples in the state of California, from so many folks. And that asset stripping needs to be repaired. And when you focus just on income, are people getting jobs? That is important. But as many of us know, you can wind up getting a job that pays good money, but if you've got a lot of your family that's not doing well, you're supporting a lot of other people and you haven't been able to buy a house, you haven't been able to generate the kind of intergenerational wealth that lets the next generation do well. That's accumulated privilege in our system, and our metrics need to get at wealth and not just income. Second, our metrics really need to get at disaggregation. Then one of the things that we've done with PolicyLink is to create the National Equity Atlas, which has highly disaggregated data for all 150 metro regions in the United States, biggest 100 cities, and actually all 400 of the counties. We've got a Bay Area Equity Atlas, and we actually also have a California Immigrant Data Portal, which actually also looks at this even more specifically for California with regard to immigrants, how they're doing disaggregated by length of time here, status, and a variety of other things. So second big thing with regard to metrics and accountability is making sure that we get the right level of disaggregation. And then the third thing is to lift up the specificities of California. One of the interesting stories about Slate Z, which Sahira knows, is that originally the application for Slate Z was given a very low ranking by Housing and Urban Development. They said that that area in South LA was not poor enough and also did not have real housing problems. Slate Z proponents, we as researchers went to HUD and said, frankly, what the hell are you talking about? And what they were talking about was that they measured poverty by joblessness. And the challenge in South LA is that while joblessness is very significant for Black residents, for the 2/3 of the community that's Latino and highly undocumented, people got jobs. They just got bad jobs. And so what you really need to look at is per capita income, working poverty, et cetera. Also, when HUD was looking at housing distress, they were looking at vacancies. And in South LA, as we well know, there aren't a lot of vacancies. It's the issue is overcrowding. And getting people to change those regulations about what they were looking at, along with the very hard work of Slate C, allowed the second proposal to come in number 2 in the country, because what HUD was measuring was not what was really the problem on the ground. So we need to be looking at wealth and not just income. We need to be disaggregating, and we need to be listening closely to community about what are the issues they actually face and how do they want to see progress measured. Sierra, what do you think of the equity metrics issues?
I think they're really critical issues. And one of the things that we'll be doing hopefully early next year is launching a new data dashboard that USC is working with us on. And it's fantastic. I've seen some early parts of it, but it really helps us drill down and see what are the outcomes that we're actually accomplishing. How are we ensuring that people are getting into jobs and living wage jobs? What are some of the shifts that some of our partners may be able to make in order to understand in a more accurate way what's happening? And then really, as we think about our jobs and our other efforts, it is taking some of this information and putting it within a wealth framework. And so when we talk about jobs, small business and entrepreneurship is the other side of that coin, because both add to that level of understanding of what is that money coming into a household in terms of those two pieces. So we need living wage jobs, and then we need small businesses that are going to be able to actually thrive. So the procurement opportunities are wonderful. And we look at small business and entrepreneurship from the perspective of foundational needs, sustainability, and growth, because we have businesses that are at very different levels, and they may have the need for a lease agreement with their landlord versus a procurement contract with the county. But they're all helping with that level of wealth building within a household in order to sustain the community. And then I also think that your piece in terms of how you connect back with the community is always a right sizing. It's always to go back and understand, are we actually doing the right things, and are we understanding the right information? With our work around universal basic mobility, which we're doing with LADOT and a number of other partners, in that effort, we have a resident advisory committee that then tells us, okay, we're implementing these various aspects of the project. Are there things that need to be shifted? Is there a different way for us to understand this? And even though it is another piece to be able to provide a resource to communities, are we implementing in a way where we're going to get the results and outcomes that were the intended purpose for the funding? So I think having that constant touching in and checking in with communities is really critical to ensure that any of the funding actually sees the outcomes and results that we're looking for. But data always helps us have a better understanding. So I'm really excited because we'll have this new data dashboard soon. We'll be able to look at our measures across Slate Z around education and small business and entrepreneurship and jobs and public safety and transit, to be able to see what kind of progress are we making within this 5-mile area with around 200,000 residents. We've already seen a big shift since the start of the Promise Zone designation. We started with a poverty level around 40%. We're now around 30%. And our demographics, in terms of our racial demographics, have roughly stayed the same. And we keep an eye on that to understand, we may not be the same exact people, but what is the mix within the community so that we aren't inadvertently really causing a significant amount of gentrification that's happening within the community, because that's another way to change the poverty rates. And that's not a way that we're interested in.
Wow. This is really a big overview for our attendees. And I think, both of what you're saying is so critical. And, my question I want to ask is kind of just really at a bird's eye highlighting the economic moment we're in and what does this mean for community. And I say that because, starting where Richard said, this is the opportunity to really dream big for communities. And so what does that really mean? So kind of just tell us what really is at stake. And someone asked, because we're using SURF a lot, if we could just take a couple steps back by kind of defining that. And if you have a little bit of the SURF history, I think that would help some of our attendees as well. Either one.
Well, I'm happy to start. This moment is so critically important. It's this moment where we have a number of pieces of work that people have been working on for decades coming together. So while parts of it may feel as if we're 10 years ago, 20 years ago, where we're talking about climate-related issues or green economy issues, it's yes and. We're talking about a moment where there are real dollars associated with all of that, so that we have a combination of elements. We have the laws and the regulations, we have the funding that's available, and then we have the will. And so we're at a moment where there is a lot of money on the table, and there is tremendous opportunity. And we can go in one of two directions. We can either go into a direction where we see a lot of transformation and change, where we're doing things the way that in an ideal world we would see these dollars implemented, or we can go into a direction where we're just doing business as usual and we see the same generational issues over and over and over again. And so at this moment, communities and groups have the opportunity to really engage and become involved in maybe issues that they weren't very deeply involved in before. Maybe they haven't been deeply involved in environmental sustainability or climate related issues. But right now, what that means is also workforce development. It means jobs, it means wealth building, it means the structure of what a community actually looks like and feels like. And so this is a tremendous opportunity to become engaged in all of those efforts. In terms of SURF, what it stands for is Community Economic Resilience Fund, and it's funding from California to really start to unlock how we're doing this future of work and this future economic development within California. So the funding will be divided up on regions. There's already been a planning grant stage. We're right now in the planning process. In Los Angeles, LAEDC, so LA Economic Development Corporation, is the leader of the efforts. They've been doing a fantastic job engaging a number of different partners, including CBOs who have been deeply engaged in various parts of that structure related to community engagement, data, governance. But it is a very comprehensive way for us to understand as California how we're going to then move into the future and invest in so many ways. The last piece I'll say about SURF is that I often think about it as a key, because there's all of this other funding that will flow at the state level and at the federal level that'll be coming into California. SURF then, in terms of a planning process and an in-depth planning process, and after the planning process, there'll be more money that follows. I think the total amount of funding is around $500 million. But as a key, it then unlocks that other funding in the future. So we at Slate Z, even as we were engaged in the transformative climate communities process and working with the South LA Eco Lab and our 18 partners who are working on that effort, even as we were doing that, we were still engaged in the SURF planning efforts because it is a very important key. And we don't want to miss the opportunity for what it will later unlock. The initial stage of what it unlocks is significant. What it will unlock in the future is even more significant, and it's probably, we can't even fully quantify it now because we don't have all of the various pieces of funding that will likely then be attached to what this unlocks in the future.
I just want to echo that last point. Then I think there'll be both what it directly unlocks and also the fact that when people start to look for, is there a table in a region where sectors have come together and decided on a more collaborative approach to economic development, and you're looking for that kind of a table for how you're going to dump your CHIPS dollars, how you're going to move your Inflation Reduction Act climate investment dollars, when the Department of Energy listens to what the Biden administration is saying in terms of the 40% of the funding from energy-related investments needing to benefit communities that are disadvantaged, where we have a great tool already in California, the Cal EnviroScreen, to identify communities that are overexposed and socially vulnerable. So I think Zahira is exactly right that it's going to specifically unlock dollars, but actually also it's just going to be the place where people go. That's why I think struggling over what these tables look like and making sure that there's a sufficient range and strength of equity voices at these tables is absolutely critical. The other thing that I would like to really lift up, I mean, you've got two folks on the call who are based in Los Angeles and actually based more specifically, I mean, USC's between downtown LA and South LA, and I do a lot of work in South LA. But there's a whole big state out there. And one of the things that we know is that the Imperial County and the Eastern Coachella Valley are going to see lots of potential benefits, but potentially some harm from the development of lithium in that area. We know that both the Bakersfield region, Kern County, and Fresno are trying to figure out, is there a high road way to sort of move away from the labor and land exploitation that have been typical of the agricultural industry and scale up in terms of value added in those industries, do better jobs, maybe bring some technology type jobs to those areas as well. We know that Sacramento is trying to look for sustainability that goes beyond government spending from the state. We know that the Bay Area is dealing perhaps most significantly, although LA's not far behind, with the whole issue of affordable housing. We know that coastal California is feeling tremendous housing pressures, even as the job development there is not producing a lot of jobs that pay living wages. We just did an equity profile with a bunch of folks from Santa Barbara and Ventura County. That is, as you go around the state, these strategies should, I think, speak from the same hymn book in terms of saying that it's our economy and we need to be able to plan it together, that equity and focusing in on equity is not a special interest issue. If you want to grow your economy in the future, you have to make sure that you've got a workforce that's prepared because of the right kind of investments that have been made. You've got to make sure that workers can actually live in the places where they work. So we've got to address affordable housing and homelessness. We have to move away from industries that rely on labor exploitation and instead promote industries that will thrive when workers thrive. So there's a issue about equity actually being our path to prosperity and not just a sort of do-gooder type issue. So we need to be speaking from the same hymn book with regard to saying that we have a right to plan our economy together. And we understand that equity is not just fairness and inclusion and doing good. It's about making sure that our economy thrives in the future. But even if we got the same hymn book, it's going to be very different churches and mosques and synagogues and heck, if you're an atheist, getting together in meeting halls, because there are very different regions in the state of California, very different demographics, very different economic constellations. And part of getting this right is going to be learning from each other from these various different regions, but not saying that every region needs to look the same.
Thank you. That is spot on. So we're already 40 minutes in, and it seems like we're just getting started. So my next question is, and I apologize, I sent out the wrong, Christina has corrected the email to send questions to. How can organizations with few resources and now little time quickly ramp up for this historical financial investment in climate resiliency, transportation, housing, et cetera? How do they get ready for the money from the feds and the state?
I'm happy to start with this. I really think it's collaboration. It's coming together in collaborative ways in order to really work together to make this opportunity work and to be able to take full advantage of it. I think one of the biggest concerns and issues for organizations, especially small organizations, when we're talking about large sums of government money, is the way it's designed. It's really hard for a smaller organization to even accept that money, because you are first accepting money where you then maybe you have partners. Those partners need to hire people in order to ramp up. And then when you are then billing, it's a reimbursement model. And so the amount of money that you have to float in order to wait then to be reimbursed becomes really, really challenging. But I think collaboration is really key to all of this so that you can rely on shared resources. Also, the collaboration that ensures that if you don't have a skill set in-house, you can then work with a partner who has that skill set. So if you, for example, are someone who is working at an organization where you have a lot of community engagement experience, you can then connect with those who are doing work around anti-displacement, or those who have a lot of policy experience, or those who do infrastructure or workforce development. That's exactly what we do at Slate Z, is that we partner with we have about 100 cross-sector partners, and we work with them collectively in order to ramp up quickly on some of these efforts. I think the other piece in terms of ramping up quickly, in order to take advantage of this, there's the funding piece and just being conscious of that. But the other part is that you need leadership within your organization to commit to something that is a little bit of a risk. The later funding isn't necessarily a risk, but you have a period of time where you're going to be working on something where maybe you don't have the funding yet in terms of that support. We just did this and did a year of work with partners where people dedicated portions of time. So we had regular meetings where and regular discussions, and people were working on proposals and other materials. And that level of dedication from leadership meant that that person who's the director of policy, or that person who's responsible for a program, we are now taking a percentage of that person's time for months to work on something where it's not funded. And only leadership can make that decision to have everyone fully at the table in order to partner, because they know that what the promise is at the other end is that the level of investment coming into the community will be significant enough in order to counterbalance the time that has been spent. But I do think that you need very firm commitments from leadership, and you need deep collaboration in order to do this work quickly.
So I would add to that one thing generally, and then one thing more specifically, which is that I think it's really important for community-based organizations, equity proponents, to realize you got this. One of the things that I think, I'm trained as an economist, I got a PhD in economics. So one of the things that I realized about economics is that we make things pretty deliberately confusing so that people feel disempowered, that they, it's too complex, you can't really participate in it. I mean, what do you know about housing? What do you know about job development? You know a lot. You live in communities, you know what communities want, you're working with communities closely, you work with businesses as well, you have an idea of how our economy functions. So I think one of the things, aside from the skill building and maybe skill sharing that Zahira is talking about, is to develop the confidence that you're supposed to be in that room. You're supposed to be part of that conversation, and someone talking about, I mean, these financial geniuses just melted down an entire cryptocurrency industry all on their own. I mean, you think they really got it? Maybe we could figure out how to do some housing in our neighborhoods in a way that makes a little bit more sense. So number one, you got this. Number two, to help you make sure you got this, one of the parts of CME with support from Sierra Health, Irvine, and others, is that we are launching a technical assistance resource center that is aimed at helping particular grantees of CME, but also other organizations as well. Now, let me say what that is. It's going to be headed by my colleague, Chris Benner, who's head of the Institute for Social Transformation at UC Santa Cruz. social transformation sounds pretty good. And we'll be partnering with PolicyLink, and I'll tell you a little bit about how we're partnering together and then what other resources are there as well. We are going to try to develop an economic development curriculum and power mapping tools so that you can be able to participate more effectively in economic development discussions. Understanding, for example, what an economic cluster is. It's a group of businesses that get together that help to drive your local economy, understanding how workforce development fits into that, et cetera. But we're going to couple that with something that makes a big difference for movement organizers, community organizers, power mapping, understanding who in your region holds economic power, holds economic decision-making authority, how much strength they've got, how much strength you've got. If you were to collaborate with others, what difference could it make? So those kind of tools, and then we'll be collaborating with PolicyLink so that as you move further in the process and you start to think about, we specifically need technical assistance around how do we articulate with the community colleges and workforce development? How do we think about the layered financing, which has to do with bringing in different sources of funding to do affordable housing? What's the technical assistance we need there? So that's something that's going to be available. Also, our colleagues at Catalyst California, used to be known as Advancement Project California, and the California Budget and Policy Center are going to be working to bring to the local level budgeting expertise so that people can look at the way dollars are going to be spent once they come down from the federal level and work their way through county budgets. How do you think about how those dollars are being spent? How do you hold people accountable? And they'll be talking about their plans to do that early in the next year. So there's going to be resources that are available, and most important, you got this.
Unmute myself. Yes, and that's really important to really believe in yourselves and your community and know that you got this and you can really make the change. So with the time that we have left, let's talk about mobilizing community and building power. Why is this work so important?
Well, I mobilizing community and building power is critically important because this is what the funding is going to. The funding is meant to serve the community. The funding is meant for our communities to be, stable and for them to grow and to be more sustainable, and to address so many of the issues that have occurred historically, from disinvestment, from an inundation of pollution in certain communities. I know that we experienced that in South Los Angeles. And so really engaging the community is going to be critically important as so much of this work in order for us to have real effective solutions. I think really where we are with so much of this work, and I really appreciate Dr. Pastor really talking about, you got this, because it really, that's just such a key, important message. This is not the time to be timid. If I could leave you with one thing, is don't be timid around this effort. This is right now is the time to act and to engage and to be deeply engaged in this work. Because really what's at stake is that we are entering into this new economy, this climate resilient economy that has a whole layer on top of it of the different types of jobs and positions and businesses and even the types of housing that we will be building in the future. And we are at the start of it. And so we have the opportunities for the communities that we've been working with, low-income communities, communities that are communities of working families, communities that have been historically disinvested. This funding has been designed for them. And funding can always be used in other ways. And so if we don't use this funding for the very communities it's been designed for, because we've engaged our communities, because they're part of the process, then there are for-profit entities that are perfectly happy to use this funding because they are ready and willing, and they have a number of projects and pieces at stake where they could present them, and we could spend this money in ways that are not going to help low-income communities. And so really engaging in that base building and power building will help to ensure that the funding goes where it needs to go. And we're using this opportunity to not only ensure that we're having a shift of transformational change that's happening within our economy, that's happening within our society, but that we're also showing that that shift is possible. So that when we invest, when we truly invest in communities, that we do see changes. And seeing the change is almost as important as how we see the money, because the will is there. I've worked in so many different projects where, at this point in my career, I've raised or leveraged like billions of dollars. And I know that money alone is never enough. You need will, but how you spend money helps to foster will. It helps to keep it there, it helps to perpetuate it, and it helps to ensure that you have developed and established something that where we see future investment and future promise of what something will look like. And so engaging the community fully in this so that they're holding not only government accountable, but they're holding us accountable too. It goes back to the data discussion that Dr. Pastor was saying, is that our communities will hold all of us accountable, and we need them to do that because there's just too much at stake to ensure that we're taking full advantage of this opportunity and that we see the real change that's possible.
Great answer. And the couple things I will lift up that don't repeat what just got said so brilliantly is number one, I was taken by a comment very early in the chat from my friend Bambi Salcedo about making sure that when we use inclusive, we're talking about everyone. Bambi was lifting up in particular trans, gender nonconforming, but another really important part of this is that we've got about 12 to 13% of the state living in mixed status families, meaning at least one person in the household lacks legal status within the country. How do we make sure that we design development programs, workforce development programs that recognize that reality and provide unemployment insurance to undocumented Californians, that provide business opportunities, business development to undocumented Californians, that are truly inclusive in all the various kinds of ways that Bambi is pointing us to as she also works on issues of immigrants and so many other issues of justice. Another thing that came up in the chat is the role of labor, and labor is going to be very, very critical to this. Our labor partners have been so important at lifting wages within certain sectors, creating the kind of guarantees and working closely with community groups on job development and job access. But one thing I really want to emphasize is this is also going to be an opportunity to develop unusual allies. And some of those unusual allies are going to be in the business community. So many of us are used to, me too, having to struggle against what business might want and what the community might want. But one of the things that's interesting that's developed in recent years is there is at least within some sector of the business community, and Zahira pointed to this in terms of the collaborations people are doing with the LA Economic Development Corporation on SURF, is that people are beginning to realize something that I said early on, that equity isn't just a special interest issue. It isn't just a fairness issue. It's about our prosperity, our productivity in California going forward. And we're going to have to learn the skills of figuring out what are the businesses that are high road businesses, what are the sectors, for example, climate resilience, where we need to put business, labor, and community together to wind up having a successful outcome, and developing those new muscles and skills. Well, that's something organizers are actually quite good at. It can actually help so many economic development professionals learn about as well.
Well, we just have about 5 minutes left, and like I said, we're just getting started. So what I'd like to just reiterate to so many of the attendees, looks like many are from representing nonprofits, is just to say that you do, it's easy to get overwhelmed. It's easy to get defeated, but this is a new territory. When you think about, so many parts of California, 1849, its history, the westward expansion, this is really what this is for our communities. And this is an opportunity to take it to another level. And there are many, many of us out there that have done some of this work. I just stepped away from a position where we did a community benefits agreement in Sacramento, and nobody thought we could do what we did. We didn't even think we could initially, and we did, and it's been a historic result for Sacramento in many ways. So I just want to say that, that's so important in this process, more than you can ever imagine. If there's anything to take away from this, just know that it's going to be tough, but it's going to be worth it, and you can absolutely do it. So we're really at the conclusion. We're just getting started again as a team. We talked about the technical assistance that will be coming along with this grant. I'll have some housekeeping that I'll do at the very end, but I like maybe starting with Richard, and then Dr. Pastor, and then Zahira, just some closing remarks for our attendees.
Thanks, Kendra. Well, first, I think just a great appreciation for Zahira and Manuel for their amazing words today, and their just a reminder of not only where we've come from, where we have to go, but the passion that we carry with us to make this happen collectively and together. Really informative and very, very helpful today. For CME, I want to make sure that folks are aware, because I've saw a few questions in the chat. We will have a request for proposals, an RFP coming out shortly in the next week or so. And part of that will be an opportunity for folks to apply, to be engaged in this amazing work, building the capacity of our community organizations, being a part of information and learning and knowledge sessions to be able to really take that next step from an economic standpoint. Combining what you've heard today, the opportunity to engage in a mobilized effort. I loved what Dr. Pastor said when he said, we all have to make sure that we are utilizing the same knowledge, the same information, the same words as we're moving ahead. And of course, I paraphrase because I could never say it as well as Manuel. Really great opportunity for us to take that next step collectively. And what you will get from us, you will get announcements. Of course, we will also be able to share this webinar moving ahead. So this will be available for you if you want to share it with others. And appreciation for your attendance today. And I will pass it over.
Thank you. Dr. Pastor,
I'll be quick.
Okay.
You got this. And we got your back. Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you again for allowing me to be here today. It's been so great to speak with everyone. I'll just leave everyone with the fact that engaging with these investments is just really critical, and taking advantage and having technical support is always so incredibly helpful to ensure that you have the information, that you feel really confident and comfortable at these various tables. And then I would also say this, as you go to the table, make sure the agenda meets the needs of your organization and the communities that you represent. And if it doesn't, then change the agenda. We did that as part of our SurfWorks with a number of other community-based organizations, where as part of our efforts, as part of the planning process, made sure that before we submitted that planning application as a region, we had enough outreach and engagement that was included in there. We had resident voice included as part of what we wanted to see. But if you need to change the agenda, change the agenda, because right now it's too important. Don't be timid. This is not the moment to be timid. We're entering into a new phase of an economy, and we want to ensure that low-income communities, communities that have been historically disinvested, are in that first tier. We do not want to have this be 20, 30 years later, we're trying to get internships when we could be the CEOs. This is the moment now in order to ensure that that happens.
Thank you. Thank you all again for your time, your energy, your effort being here today. Again, I want to reiterate that the recording will be posted on YouTube, and you can connect through it through our website. And then please email your questions to the email that's in the chat. And we will be sending out more information for our RFP. Thank you all for joining us today and being a part of this kickoff conversation. We look forward to much more. Take care. Have a great day.